Well, ladies and gentlemen, Joe Vish here with the FST 1093 EMS Law class. To my left here is Matt Olson, the founder of the Illinois Firefighter Peer Support Group, here to sit and do an interview with me. Thank you, Matt, for coming out and doing this today. I appreciate it. Like I said, Matt is the founder of the Illinois Firefighter Peer Support Group and a member of the Bolingbrook Fire Department, and also a member, vice president of the IFF in Illinois here. So Matt, thank you again for coming out. Some questions here. First off, you started the peer support group. You are the founder. What made you or gave you the idea to start this peer support group here in Illinois for firefighters?
You know, it's interesting. If I tell you the whole story, we're going to be here for about 2 hours. But I can give you the abbreviated version, which is I was great for a long time. I'm in my 29th year in the fire service, my 25th year here in Bolingbrook, and the first 22 or so of those were no problem. Then things started kind of catching up with me, and I didn't really understand it. And I went through a period personally where depression became an issue, suicidal ideations became an issue, things that had been my past with success, like alcohol, became an issue. And all of it at the same time. I had a really difficult 2012 that I ended up really struggling. And I went and saw a counselor myself, and I always give her a shout out because if you meet Laura Farrar here in Naperville, Illinois, she'll save your life like she did mine. And the interesting thing about that was when I sat down with her, I was confident that I was at the end of my rope, that there was no really good outcome here. But I needed to do that because I have 2 kids, I have a wife, I have responsibilities, and I wanted to know that at least I tried my best and I did everything I could do before I did something permanent. And surprisingly, what counseling did for me was if I could reduce everything we've done there into a soundbite, is 5 years of counseling gave me back the gift of hope. And that was what was awesome about it because depression, suicide, things like that, hopelessness is truly what it feels like. And I can promise you that a sliver of hope is more powerful than a head full of anxiety, fear, depression, and bad memories. Didn't know that before, but I learned that lesson. And I was just satisfied to be better. I was okay with that. I kind of wanted to put myself back together and see where that went. And we came here one day and we had a training in the department that it was a counselor came in and talked about emotional wellness. And it struck me because a lot of the things he talked about, I had lived, and sitting in the back of the room being quiet about it, but I knew every word was true. And I was just driving home, and here I am, an officer on the job here. I'm my local union president, I'm a vice president with the state, and I think of myself as a leader, but I'm terrified to share this part of me. And on my way home, I just thought, what kind of leader am I if I don't really tell the truth about where I've been? So I did. I came back to all of our members, and we had a conversation about really what the last 5 years looked like, and more importantly, what counseling looked like, and how it changed everything. We suffered through 2 suicides here on the fire department in the time that I've been here.
Here in Bolingbrook?
Here in Bolingbrook, and another on the police department. And that shouldn't be true, but it is true. And I just didn't want that to be something that became a checkbox training, if you will. Oftentimes our training officers will bring somebody in and we'll talk about, I always go back to the right to know stuff where we learn about how we're not supposed to put bleach in the ammonia bottle. The gasoline cans have to be labeled. I need to know what's in this detergent. And we really don't. But they have to legally tell us those things. And when they're done, they check the box saying we gave them that training. See you next year. Mm-hmm. And I didn't want this important training to be something that became a checkbox training. It's like, all right, we talked to the guys about mental health. They're good. When I knew that they weren't good. Right. And so I got together with a few other counselors and a few firefighters, and we sat down in the basement of Fire 3 here in Bolingbrook, and we talked about it. So what do you think would work? And ultimately what we thought would be a great idea was, what if we all talk to each other about the things that we share? Because not every one of us struggles all the time, but we all struggle. And that's normal. And it didn't feel normal. I felt anything but normal. And so that's what we wanted to kind of bring back to the fire service. It's just a conversation with our peers in the fire service about the bad times. We learn all the time when we train about how to protect our vessels. We're always learning about carcinogens. Now we're all washing our pneumatic hoods and we never did before. That's important. We don't want to get throat cancer, and we don't. And so there's constantly studies about our physical presence and what happens to our bodies. But that's just a vehicle to carry on who we really are, and that's our minds. And so we thought it was important to take some steps to protect that. And if our initial goal really was just to be available if somebody struggled in the way that I did, and it sort of morphed into a lot of conversations with a lot of firefighters about how emotional wellness matters. And that's really how it started. And it kind of caught wind once we sort of hung out the shingle. A lot of people rang the phone.
People
nice.
came out of the woodwork, kind of, in a sense, to there's finally something there that
right.
a lot of people have needed. Okay, so what's the purpose then? What's your mission of the peer support group? What do you guys go out there and what do you do?
Primarily what we do is we educate. Excuse me. We have this conversation about what worked, and we talk about a few things. Make it safe. And what I mean by that is we do everything we can to make this job safe. But I want our firefighters to know to make it safe to struggle. Make it safe to not be okay today. Just don't stay there. What has to happen for you to get well? Make it safe for each other, guys. And if this is a firehouse where I can walk in and have a tough time and mention it, have that conversation rather than take it home or find some ancillary way to deal with it, that's what we're looking for. How do we do that? Make it safe becomes the power of a conversation. There was nothing miraculous that saved my life. It was conversation. It was a bunch of conversations, but that's all it was. And if a conversation is that powerful, we wanted firefighters to have those. So first, recognize that it's okay to struggle, and second, talk about it. Do something about it.
Okay. All right. So what need do you see being filled right now at this program? And then looking ahead, what future needs do you see that still need to be addressed to kind of grow your program a little bit?
The things that we're doing well are the conversation continues, and there are players in the game, if you will, that I didn't really expect we would see so quickly. People like the Illinois Fire Chiefs Association, our state union, the Northern Illinois Alliance Fire Protection Districts, a lot of trade groups that are influential with a lot of departments who have given us access to a lot of members. Sharing the message is become easy to do here because of that. I love that. I think that's incredible. And the conversation is present. When I meet somebody, oftentimes I'll get a phone call that nobody knew about, or I'll get pulled off to the side after a meeting, and somebody will just say, hey, let me talk to you about this thing that I'm going through. And I know that they've carried that for a while, and I'm not the only one that's getting those conversations. There's a lot of people within the Illinois Firefighter Peer Support Team, over 300, that people recognize and they're available. I think the thing we've done the best is to continue that conversation and to sort of create a new normal for what toughness looks like in the fire service. And to me, we want to redefine toughness, because strength isn't that guy that carries a burden to the point of suicide. Strength is somebody that asks for help. Strength is somebody that says, hey, this thing is too heavy for me and I'm going to need you to help me with it. So that's what we're doing really well. What I would like to see addressed in the future, if we have one thing that I could choose to do, it would be to work with our State Fire Marshal's office and our education people, whether it's Illinois Fire Service Institute or some of these other academies. And I would like to see an emotional wellness component taught to firefighter basic. As you walk in the door, learn these things. Now, you may look at that class and say, well, man, I don't feel any of that and I don't really feel a need. That's fine. But what's important is we've mentioned it. I still think about things that my dad taught me, just mentioned in passing when I was 7, and they still come to mind. I'm like, oh man, that
things jump out when you need them.
Right, exactly. And so, okay, hang on to this. Get into the fire service, do a great job, but think about this, because this may not impact you now, but I want you to know if and when it does, you can talk about it. And the second place I would like to see that inserted is the first line fire officer, because a lieutenant or a captain of a house has a lot of responsibility, and if they do a good job with that, people will have a place to go. And I think it's important to learn it a second time, because we look at the same things differently in an officer role than we did as a firefighter role. So that's an effort that I'm working on currently that I would hope give us a year or two that we start to see some change.
Okay. So do me a favor, explain exactly how your program works, how members can get in contact, what services you guys offer. Kind of give me a brief description of the whole program itself.
The cliff notes of the program are, we have a group of firefighters that are willing to have a conversation with another firefighter that's in any kind of a need. And we get calls for all kinds of different things. Some people struggle with an immediate incident. This thing happened and it's on my mind now and I want to deal with that. Others don't do that. They carry those things for months or years. And when the time that it does become problematic, they want to talk about it. It can become something completely personal that may not directly connect to the fire service. But we all know how that, if you're a career firefighter and you're working these 24-hour shifts and you're gone for a long period of time,
You bring it to work.
You do bring it to work. None of us were the nuclear family with the white picket fence. Most firefighters brought something in their history to this job, and that sooner or later will surface. I had a firefighter call me because a child was born with autism. He just didn't know what that looked like. What do I do? And I knew another firefighter with the very same experience, and we put them together, and they had a long conversation about how they dealt with that and what their career looks like with that. And it changed so much for them in terms of how they view people, particularly kids. Things that you may not necessarily see as fire department related, but all of these things that happen to us, whether it's professional or personal or historical, they impact us. And we, unfortunately, in the fire service, don't get to take a break. For us, the hits keep coming. We don't get to decide this thing's a little uncomfortable. I'm not going to take that run. You just got to go. Right. And then when it's done, you handle it. Take those things home, and they become exponentially worse if you don't deal with those things. So we provide an opportunity for anybody that's got anything on their mind and just wants to say, how did another fireman handle this? Because I'm not feeling well right now, and I want to get back to the place where I am well. We connect them with a fireman that can help them do that. That's really our main mission. So in the absence of an immediate need, we will continue holding classes. We will continue writing papers. We will continue being published. We've taught 6 or so classes at FDIC just to make sure that the conversation keeps happening.
Keeps it fresh.
Yeah, so the broad brush is us making sure that this becomes a thing, that this isn't a thing that dies on the vine.
It's not a fad, it's actually becomes a norm.
I don't want the next Beanie Baby, right? We want this to be a thing that stays. So we continue that conversation, and as the rubber meets the road, that's our main mission is, hey, you know what? Before you get to the place that Matt got, I would always recommend counseling for anybody. But what if you guys had this conversation now and didn't wait the 20 years I waited? What if we thought it was okay to deal with these things now? And we provide people that can do that for you.
Okay. What are the biggest challenges you have with getting the program started? What were some of your hurdles to get this thing going? Getting members to participate and kind of stay in it, whether they're peers or whether they're firefighters looking for help. And then again, talk maybe about any issues you see with keeping this program growing as you see down the road.
One of the biggest challenges in getting the program started was finding the people to do it with. Finding firefighters who are altruistic is not that difficult. This is a program that we really do need some professional help with. We need professional counselors that can assist us, because sooner or later we're going to find something that puts us out in front of our skis. We need to be ready to have an answer for that. Developing the curriculum. A lot of us are really good firemen. We've never written books. We've never developed classes. So how do we do that appropriately? And so it was important for us to have professional clinicians that worked with us. It did become challenging to find professional clinicians that had that same altruistic vision of a greater fire service. And I'm not blaming them. I understand their situation as well, but they've got a job to do. And when our program became something as a vehicle to generate revenue towards a practice, that wasn't our direction. That's not what we wanted to do. And that's why I was excited to find Dr. Kristen McInnes, who really did share that altruistic vision. She's a spouse of a police officer, and she honestly has never asked us for anything. But each time we call her, she's given us everything. And so it took a few years to get to that person. And it's something that we couldn't really do without that person. So I would say if I had to choose one biggest hurdle, that was it.
Okay. All right. So now getting into the program itself, what are the mental health issues that you see most commonly that you guys are getting calls for or dealing with within your specific program?
The thing that I think we see the most is a depression that somebody finally recognized. And they don't necessarily want to put a finger on or label it. That's a scary thing when it shouldn't be. You know, you've never heard a psychiatrist or a psychologist tell you, you know, good news, Joe, you have joy. You'd say, well, that's
Yeah,
awesome.
that's
So each
true.
day and every day, I want that. That's great news. No, it comes and it goes. And the same is true when they tell you have depression. It's not something that you need to truly, um, you know, give up on. Depression is a mood, and it's a mood it's the most devastating, one of the most devastating psychological issues. It's also one of the most treatable. That's so common that people go through this transient period, and we want them to know that it doesn't have to be forever. Just because you're struggling now, it doesn't have to be forever. So when we can help people understand that their depression is okay, and it's also something we can take care of with appropriate steps, that's always exciting because I know what that felt like. And I also know what it felt like to get better from that. Addictions are common, unfortunately, and in the fire service, alcohol is not necessarily accepted, it's encouraged. You know, it's one of those things that it
It's a
becomes
bonding
social.
thing.
It
Yeah.
very much is. And I remember a lot of nights where we didn't buy the next beer, we bought the next bucket, you know. And those things can kind of get away from us. And a lot of us don't necessarily use alcohol with the intent of medicating our needs. It's not like, man, I'm gonna have a bad day today, but alcohol will take care of that. We're not consciously aware. We just gradually use it a little more than we should, sometimes at the wrong time, and it becomes problematic, which brings me to the next, which is the family issues. It's like I'm all of a sudden everything was great, and I'm going through a divorce. How do I reconnect with my spouse? My kids won't talk to me. Um, you know, and those things are all too common in the fire service. So I think those are some of the biggest things, most common things that we see.
Okay, so let's take your program and let's compare it to like an employee assistance program, EAP, or critical incident stress management or debriefing. How are you guys different from those other, and why do people go to yours that may or may not choose one of those other programs? How are they different?
The biggest way that they're different is we're available for you now, 5 months from now, 5 years from now, or post retirement. And that's what's important to us. I can't tell you when to feel bad. I can't tell you when to be angry. I can't tell you when to grieve or how to grieve. And there are what an insurance company might call qualifying events, right? Our career has the same thing. I think about often those firefighters in Newtown who walked in and found an entire preschool devastated, and what they must have seen. And some of them, I imagine, got through that, and didn't ask for a lot. Some of them probably asked for a ton. But what happens 5 years down the road now when they're walking their child into preschool? I bet that feels a lot different.
Right. Yeah.
That's one of those qualifying events that all of a sudden now you have this child. This thing happened 5 years ago, and you thought you were past that, but I don't feel well. I'm not past it. Who are you going to call? There's no chief in the world saying, well, wow, your kid turned 5. I should get CISD out here. That's not how that works. So we wanted to provide a vehicle that they always knew at any time they had somebody available. And where I think CISD, for what they do, does a good job. I think the few times that I've had to experience a CISD event, I left feeling sort of unfulfilled. And it's not their fault, but they came in, we sat in a circle, we talked about things, and then they left. And the chief said, there, I'm taking care of my guys.
Yeah.
And he probably had the best of intentions, but I didn't really feel all that taken care of. So what happens next? And then maybe you get connected with your EAP because you're struggling on the job. But what's unfortunate in the professional fire service is I've seen EAP used as a last resort to avoid more severe discipline.
Termination type.
Right. It's like I've really stepped in it, and I've got to admit I need help. I want to change that with our program to where guys proactively seek counseling to say, you know what, let's get ahead of this before I do something I would regret at work or before my life becomes problematic at home. So while I support absolutely CISD and EAPs, our program is a little bit different in that at any time, whenever you choose or whenever that qualifying event happens to you, for whatever reason you're struggling, give us a buzz and we'll provide you with that firefighter peer. And if that's not enough, we'll provide you with a counselor.
Okay. All right. So let's talk about the kind of going to the legalities a little bit of your program. Discuss the policies that you guys have and procedures with confidentiality. You know, legally led any legislators that have had any influence on you guys, whether you guys are bound by any laws, like kind of like HIPAA. You know, kind of go into that a little bit.
Well, we're very careful in Illinois to call our peer supporters. Frequently, I hear the term, hey, what do I need to do to become a peer counselor? Well, you should go to counseling school. That's what you should do. We don't do that, and we're careful about that word because counselors have different legal requirements than we do. We're not mandated reporters. We are people that can have a conversation in the same way that we would across the coffee table at the firehouse.
Okay.
And we want it to be that available. We don't want that pressure and stress. So we make sure that our guys know that this conversation stays here. And we have been fortunate that we haven't had any of those confidentiality breaches. It's a deal breaker for us if one of our peer supporters was to talk about that, but they all respect the program and that hasn't been the case.
That's good.
What we do to make sure that that remains true is if you were to call us, one of 3 people would reach out back to you, and they would get your first name and your phone number, and that's what they would give back to that peer supporter. Joe from Will County has an issue, and this is the issue. We connected him. That's that. We don't keep records of your last name, your addresses, all of those things. We don't keep records of who we connected you with. We want that conversation belongs to you, not me. We just want to know that you're taken care of. And
That you are connected to somebody, it's just not your business.
absolutely.
Okay.
And so if anybody were to breach our database, they'd find it pretty unfulfilling. So it's important that we remain in that way where we can operate as peers, as friends, as neighbors, not as clinical people. We're not clinical in any way. We're just firefighters talking to other firefighters. Now, when we have a high-risk event, which has happened, and we tell all of our firefighters, do just what you would do if you were at work and somebody dialed 911 and you heard these things. If somebody talks about self-harm, if somebody talks about hurting another person, all of those triggers that we know become police events or automatic, you're going to have to get transported. We do. We do keep that phone number, and we ask for a callback just so that when that does happen, that peer supporter can say, well, you know what, this is the phone number I have. 3 times we've had to have police do a well-being check. All of them turned out well.
That's good.
They were good. The police went in and firefighters said, I did say those things. I'm not necessarily in that place, but I'm really struggling to reach out. From that point, we won't do any more peer interaction until we know that there's counseling with a professional. So the legislature in Illinois did come to us and talk about mandated trainings, mandated requirements, and they had the best of intentions. They really did just want to facilitate this program and make sure that firefighters are getting well. We were hesitant because we don't really think that mandates are the best for us right now. Mm-hmm. When we get all of the trade groups, the state fire marshal, the fire chiefs, the unions, the volunteer firefighters, all of those people on the same page, and we figure out a way to get everybody's needs met, maybe then we can have a bigger conversation about how to do that. But as of right now, it works really well for us to not be mandated reporters, to just be neighbors, friends, firefighters, and to have the freedom to have a conversation with no stress or pressure. And so that's how we do it in Illinois.
Okay. Any other legal challenges that you guys have had, whether it's from the inception of the program, dealing with, growing the program, any other legal issues or problems you guys have had?
No, we've been fortunate that we haven't any problems. There are some steps, some hurdles we needed to clear in order for us to raise money. We had to become a 501c3 charity, which we had an attorney, Jerry Marzullo, out of Berwyn, Illinois. He essentially did all of the legwork to create that program for us. So we are recognized as a 501c3 with the federal government, so we have the ability to receive tax deductions. So if you gave us, a donation, you could write that off, which became important because without that, departments were not going to pay for one of our classes to send a firefighter to, and it became easier for bigger groups to want to donate money to us. Okay. So that's just a legal hurdle we had to clear. But fortunately, we haven't had any negative experiences in terms of our program and the law.
That's good. Hopefully it stays that way.
Right.
All right, a couple more here. Any advice for those interested in joining, whether it be as a peer or looking to reach out for assistance, with your program? What would you tell people who want to get involved in one of the 2 aspects, whether is someone looking for help or someone who wants to give help?
Somebody looking for help, I would just encourage you to do that. It's courageous to get to that point, to recognize that. And I know that when people come up and have what I otherwise would have considered a simple conversation, I remind myself, that person had that idea or that thought or that experience in their head 50 times before they shared that. So it's probably much more important than I gave it credit for. So I try to be mindful of that. So when somebody does ask for help, or when you get to a point where you think you need help, respect how courageous it was to get to that point, and then follow through, because you will get better in the same way that I did. It works. You know, these conversations are healing and they're important. And go get yourself the gift of normal. If we can choose to be well or choose to be awful, choose well.
Yeah.
It's out there for you. So that's what I'd ask for the person looking for help. If somebody wanted to support our group and be a part of it, I would welcome that. First of all, you know, there's really no wrong person for it. I think about all of us have, whether we're a volunteer department, a part-time department, a career department, there's one guy on your job that nobody likes, right? There's that guy that can't get anything
It might
right.
be that guy. Who knows?
Well, right? I have at times been that guy. But I can promise you that guy's got a best friend. Somebody cares about that person.
True.
So whoever you are, you fit in, right? This is a place that you can do some good. And if you don't think maybe you're connected in the right way to the fire service, and maybe I'm not the person for this, I promise you there's somebody waiting on you that doesn't want to talk to me.
Mm-hmm.
So be a part of it. Be aware that you're going to have to connect with some of the tougher times in your life. That's not always comfortable.
Makes it a little more awkward.
It does. And it's, you know, the things that we were able to successfully work through, we don't always want to go visit. The stove's hot, we know that. Let's try not to touch it. But sometimes it's hard when we're having a conversation with a peer to not get kind of taken back yourself. So just be aware that that may happen to you. And at that time, I want you as a peer supporter to have the courage to say, hey, I need to step off for a little bit. Like, I got to take a break myself and go make sure I'm okay. And I think that's the best advice I could give somebody trying to get in and be a peer supporter. It's a really, really rewarding, meaningful experience that can sometimes be really difficult to do.
Okay. And then lastly, wrapping up here, what's your opinion right now on the current state of mental health in the fire service with EMS? You know, the changes that we've seen in just our careers, and then maybe going back even farther, going to the future as far as, you know, the stigma, because there's a mental health stigma that's everywhere throughout the country, and probably even more so in police and fire, because again, you got the macho man, and it's just part of the job, and suck it up, kid. If you can't take it, you know, hit the bricks, you know, those types of things. And then you get programs like yours that are completely 180 to that. And how do you see the mental health right now, and how that's changed and how it's progressing?
I'm super encouraged. I really do think that this isn't a transient thing. I think this is going to become the new normal, if it hasn't already, because it really might have. You know, our program has branched out to 12 other states, Florida 3 different times, where we've helped develop statewide programs or internal programs if you're a big enough city. You know, Alaska, Minnesota, Kentucky, Indiana a couple times, Florida a few times, you know, North Carolina, Connecticut, Missouri. We're missing, I'm sure I'm going to miss some others. But when that happens, it tells me that we're not alone here. The things that you experience in Joliet, Illinois, or Bolingbrook, Illinois are not different from what somebody might experience in St. Paul, Minnesota. Mm-hmm. The impact of this career to us is big, and it's common. And so I do think that this is something that is going to be accepted. I get a lot of conversation with fire chiefs who have an employee that is in trouble. Like, this guy did this thing. And the conversation isn't, what do I do to discipline him to control that behavior, change that behavior? It's, hey, I really want him okay. Is there something we can do to get him there? Good. And I'm seeing that that is what's happening. So if you think about 10 years ago, if you were to go to FDIC in Indianapolis, for example, there were mental health or emotional wellness offerings. Mm-hmm. Now they're there by the dozens. And if you just Googled peer support programs, you know, 5 years ago, you wouldn't have found Illinois. Now you're going to find far more than Illinois. The International Association of Firefighters has developed one, and they can connect with 300,000 firefighters. So I'm excited, I suppose. It's very, very different. I know when I started in 1989, it wasn't common. You saw something, you moved on. And that was, and I'm not blaming anybody. I think at the time, people gave us the best advice that they had. I think over time, we've learned there's better ways to do these things. You know, and historically in the fire service, we took these tough things and we put them on the shelf, whether they were personal or professional. And once they're on the shelf, they're not my problem anymore. Unfortunately, they are your problem, and eventually that shelf's going to collapse. Mm-hmm. So the better thing to do is when you start to connect with whatever's troubling you, you process it. You get help from another peer who's been through it and survived it. You get help from a professional counselor, and you go through these things appropriately. And when you've done that, when you've been able to process the things that are bothering you, now they're safely put away in what I think of as a file cabinet versus that shelf. And I see that happening in a ton of places in the fire service, and I love it. I think that we're probably not where we're supposed to be yet. This is a new program, and it's evolving, and I think it's only going to get better. But I do think that the fire service is welcoming of this. I have yet to meet a firefighter who said that's a horrible idea. Now, I've had some that said it's not for me right now, and that's okay. I would celebrate your career if it never was.
Right.
But I have yet to hear any fire chief, any subordinate chief, any officer, or any line firefighter say, nah, that's a terrible idea. They all listen and they think back to the things that were on their mind. And it's kind of a breakfast club moment. It's like a coming together where, in spite of whatever differences we may have, we share this thing. So let's get through it.
Okay. All right, Matt Olson, founder of the Illinois Firefighter Peer Support Group. Thank you very much for your time.
My
I
pleasure.
appreciate it. Everybody, hope you enjoyed the video here, and I hope you learned something for the program. And as always, guys, please stay safe out there. Thank you.